So I am Aaron. I'm from Cage Data, and I want to talk about storytelling, which is oddly relevant to earlier talks we had today. Because I think storytelling is really important in who we are and how we communicate as just even a species. It's something we've been doing for a really long time. It's just kind of how we manage the world. In fact, our brains basically tell us stories all day long. It's how we process data. All the cognitive biases we have are our brains either trying to make meaning out of seeming chaos or trying to fill in the gaps for information we don't have, or just trying to figure out what's important and what's not. So all of it is done through narrative to ourselves and communicated through narrative out. We try to assign meaning to everything. In fact, there was a study done with college students. They were shown these abstract shapes, and it was animated then. They kind of moved across the screen, except for the rectangle on the side. When asked what they saw, almost all of them anthropomorphized what happened. They assigned motivations to the shapes. So this one was afraid, this one wasn't. Which is a lot like what we do when we have data. When we've got a lot of numbers and data points, they don't really mean anything by themselves. We have to dig in and get to the subtext, find out what the context of that is and the story that it tells to figure out why it's relevant. When we engage emotions, we find out that we actually retain information a lot better as well. People retain information up to 22 times better when it's weaved into narrative. So when we actually tell a story and engage people on that level, they react much better. We're motivated by our emotions. That's what actually drives us. We can say we're analytic and make data decisions all the time, but our emotions are what move us forward. So we can do something with that. So we can understand now that if people don't communicate in numbers, that's probably not the best way to talk to them. If you've got any sort of proposal for any sort of initiative and all you're doing is presenting facts and numbers and arguments, it really just provides a way for someone else to create counterfacts and counterarguments in their head and argue with you. But if you start weaving a narrative and start engaging people on the story that you're telling, you can actually get a lot further with it. You see much better success with that. And we're not necessarily just painting a rosy picture, because that rings false. We want to tell the truth with it, and struggle's really important to good stories. You know, Henry V, once more into the breach, dear friends, once more, or close up the wall with our English dead. He's not saying it's going to be really easy. He's saying it's going to be hard. We might actually fail, but the stakes are so high, we have to do it. And that's a much better story to tell. So the other side of telling stories is actually listening to it. We have to have people that are listening to the stories as well, or else they also don't matter. And what we're doing when we listen to stories is we're starting to practice the empathy that we need to have in our organizations to make us be able to work together well. They found that people that read fiction are more empathetic than others. They actually did studies on this and found that when they're reading a relevant short story and they tested for bias later, it would actually eliminate much of that bias when they were doing the tests. We're practicing being someone else. Sometimes we find out that the story's there and the information supports what we believe, but when we're challenged, we've just spent a lot of time finding out what motivates that person that's challenging our beliefs. So we practice getting into someone else's head and understanding not just who they present, but their actual motivations behind that, what drives them. We're practicing the theory of mind, that not only are there other people here that we can see, but they're also as well-rounded as us as a character. They have fears, they have dreams, they have desires. So when someone says something like this with a period at the end, are they really mad at me and they're not wanting to see me soon, or do they just like to use proper grammar? We have to understand who they are to interpret that correctly. It's really hard, because we have to start telling really truthful stories, and that can put us in a really vulnerable place. A lot of times we practice just presenting the rhetoric or just presenting the face that we're used to showing people, and for this to really matter, we have to start being really truthful and show the pain and the fears that go in that too. But it's necessary to really work together. This is a great book that I think you should read. I don't have time to read the quote, but the whole premise of it is about empathy for other people, and since it's science fiction, it's other species. But the gist of it is we want to be excellent to each other, right? Because it takes that vulnerability and that trust to really make these stories worth it and to really improve our lives. Thank you.